often when I teach people to use stories in their communication and to write in a really clear way, they nod their head and they get it, they're on board with it, but then they come back with the challenge, well, nobody talks like that in our company. It's a fair challenge, and what I respond with is look at the way Warren Buffett writes. Now, Warren Buffett, you may have heard of, he's the world's third richest man. Every year, Warren Buffett writes this famous annual letter to shareholders. I've got an example of it here. As soon as you start reading, you notice that this document is written in a very uncorporate way. It's full of kind of like folksy wisdom, and it's written like almost like a grandfatherly letter. I think it's one of the best forms of business communication I've ever seen, certainly. Now, the fact that Warren Buffett, one of the world's most powerful people, writes in such a down-to-earth style, I think is really important to know if you're someone who values clear, down-to-earth communication yourself, because he's someone you can point to say, well, if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me. Now, the fact that he writes in this way is not exactly a secret. There's so many blog posts, articles being written on his engaging style of writing, but to my knowledge, no one's ever actually picked apart his writing and figured out what makes it so easy and fun to read. What techniques is he using that we can copy too? So I went through his annual letters way back to 1965. You can see I've got all of them here, and I noted down the techniques that he's using, and I came up with a list of 12 techniques that I thought I'd share with you. Let me just expand this. So I'm just going to pick on a few of these. The first one I want to pick on is this one that I noticed. I noticed that Warren Buffett uses a lot of emotional language. Now, most business writing you see uses very distant language. So sales were soft, results came in below expectations. It's always something else happening to somebody else. And what you notice about the way he communicates is that he uses very emotional language. So let me give you some examples. You can see he's talking about competition in his business area, and he's talking about major losses. He's talking about 12% being a horrendous figure. Another example, it's frightening, insurance catastrophes. He's talking about in California, their business has been a disaster. Now, I'm not saying he's swearing like a sailor here, but he's not mincing his words. That's the important thing. And communicating like this creates a sense of honesty. You really feel like he's grasping the nettle. And that's important because today people want leaders who are not only going to spot the alligator, they're going to drain the swamp as well. And using raw language when something goes wrong is a great way to communicate that you're one of them. So here's an interesting technique. He follows fact with metaphor. What do I mean by that? Let me give you some examples. So here he's talking about that they didn't exercise enough caution in their insurance business, and he has quite a dry sentence followed by a nice metaphor. So it's dry sentence, and then you do not adequately protect yourself by being half awake while others are sleeping, which I think is a really kind of neat little visual. Let me give you another example. So he's talking about a major purchase that didn't quite happen, and he's talking about the reasons why this major purchase, this major acquisition didn't happen. So again, a dry, fairly technical sentence followed by a little snappy metaphor. The empire would have been larger, but the citizenry would have been poorer. One more example. He's talking about how they can't forecast interest rates, and what should they do with their cash, and he's talking about how they're going to hold on to their cash in case they need to make big acquisitions. So again, a quite businessy, technical sentence, but it's followed by this metaphor. Our basic principle is that if you want to shoot rare, fast-moving elephants, you should always carry a loaded gun. So the effect that putting metaphor after fact has is that it creates a feeling that you're getting smarter as you read, because even if you don't understand this, you understand this. So it's like this kind of solves one of the big problems with using metaphor in business writing. People love metaphor because it helps them to understand things, but it can risk dumbing down business content. You probably hate it when people use Janet and John explanations as something that you understand. So putting metaphor after something complicated helps you to understand it, and it helps create a sense of anytime you read something that's hard, you are encouraged because you think after it there's going to be something fun. So let me give you another example. I've noticed that Buffett is really humble in the way he writes, and this is quite interesting. I'll kick off with some examples first. So he's talking about they're looking for ways to expand their insurance operation. So this is a related point, but a little bit different. I've noticed that he uses something called I'm calling the clarity kick. I've not really seen this described elsewhere, so I've kind of made up a name for it. I'll show you some examples. It's basically when you end a detailed explanation with a snappy remark. It's a little bit the same as using a metaphor after something dry, but it's just a kind of snappy quip to wake the reader up. So let me show you an example. He's talking about how in this accounting period several of their competitors used accounting tricks to make themselves appear more solid and stable, and he has this fairly technical passage, and then he just rounds it off with, it's difficult for an empty sack to stand upright. So when you get to that, you instantly understand what he's been talking about. I'll give you another example of this. He's talking about how in his company the staff invest in their own shares, and the company is actually owned by him and other family members. So he's got this just description of the ownership structure of the company, and he ends it with the line, "We eat our own cooking." So it's a beautiful way to sum up what the business jargon that he's just used. And the effect of this, of course, is that it keeps readers engaged, because they soon learn that anything hard, anything a bit technical will be clarified at the end of the paragraph, at the end of the class. So I think that's a technique that you can apply to your own writing. Just go back after you've finished whatever you're working on, and anything that seems a bit hard, you don't have to rewrite it, you don't have to kind of dumb it down, just tack on a little clarity kick right at the end of the paragraph. Another thing I've noticed about his writing is that he's quite humble. He's really humble. I'll just give you a couple of examples. So he is talking about they're trying to figure out ways to grow, and he's saying, well, don't get too excited, because some of our expansion efforts, largely initiated by me, have been lackluster. Others have been expensive failures. So he's kind of being self-deprecating in an amusing way. I think if you have the power to do that, if you have the confidence to do that, you should go ahead, because the overall effect is very much one of strength rather than weakness. Another thing that you can do, if you're able to, is not take the subject matter too seriously. This might seem quite counterintuitive, but in fact he does it all the time. There's a real strong sense of like amused detachment in his writing. So he's always poking fun at the subject matter, even though it's a topic that he loves so much, obviously. And I think it's a great effect. I'll give you some examples. So he begins an essay on a business topic by saying, you can live a full and rewarding life without ever thinking about goodwill and its amortization. And he's talking about inflation and investment and the relationship between them. Copies of previous discussions are available for masochists. And he's flagging up that they're going to be talking about intercorporate taxes and purchase price adjustments. And he says, we know you can hardly wait. So it's just quite subtle stuff, but it communicates that there is more important stuff than the topic at hand. It just makes it much more fun to read, and it's very human as well. I think it's a great effect to have. So here's the final thing I want to share with you. I've noticed him using this technique that I'm calling gentle enlightenment. That's the best way I can think of describing it. It's basically where he opens a paragraph with quite an in-depth explanation of something, and then he sort of eases up towards the end of the paragraph. I remember in one of his letters he talks about his admiration for the World Book Encyclopedia, and what they would do when they put together the encyclopedia is they would make each encyclopedia entry really easy, start off very simple to read so a kid can understand it, and then gradually make the syntax get more complicated as the article goes on, so a child can pick it up and not be put off that they can't even make it through the first 50 words. And he turns that on its head. He kind of makes things start out hard and get easier, and it makes you feel like you're understanding, you're actually getting smarter and growing with him as he explains. And I think all of us can apply that to our writing wherever we work. I just want to leave you with, go back to the start and leave you with basically a trick for how he does all this. Because if you're thinking, well, that's great, but how am I going to write this way? Well, I'll share with you his trick. His trick is to write for one person. He says that whenever he sits down to write, he's actually thinking of his two sisters, Doris and Bertie. He says that he pretends like they're sitting in front of him, and he's just explaining these concepts to them. So I hope some of this helps. I've not gone through all of the examples here because it would just take a long time, and there's so much stuff. There's so much stuff here. Let me just show you some of this. Oh my god. So what I've done is that I've actually written a book, which you can see here, How to Write Like Warren Buffett. And if you go to the URL on the screen now, you can actually download a free copy. It'd be great if you want to check that out. It's free of charge. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope it helps you to write in a more engaging and authoritative way. And I hope it helps you to explain things without dumbing them down. So thanks for watching.